The Ashkenaz Festival returns to locations across Toronto from August 30th to September 6th. Experience the best of the global Jewish music scene, including klezmer, Yiddish, Sephardic, Ladino, Persian, and so much more. Most programs free, from downtown to North York. Details at ashkenaz.ca.
Listeners may not know, I did not want to come on the Jewish angle the first time. Phoebe talked me into it. She was like, why don't you break all the codes of silence in the publishing industry? And I was like, I think that would destroy my career. False.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and you're listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. Best-selling author Meg Keene came on this podcast in April to talk about the state of publishing for Jewish authors. Since then, so much has happened, and I'm thrilled to have Meg back on to discuss all of that so much that has happened. Meg, welcome back.
Thank you. I assume that you're going to change my life yet again.
Who knows what's next for you? Do you have any countries you wish to lead, or anything?
Phoebe, you won't get it. You know what?
Yes.
Not Israel. Why don't you not give me Israel to lead? I'll pass.
I'll hang on to. I'll continue my own leadership of it, which obviously, I feel like somebody's going to hear this, not get sarcasm, and be like, "Aha, we found the person in charge of Israel." No, I can barely deal with my own email inbox. I'm not going to run any countries. But you have an imprint. Explain. You have a publishing imprint. What does this mean, and how did this come about?
Oh, well, it came about because of the Jewish angle. Last time I came on, and I was like, oh, this is a way to dip my toe in the water. Listeners may not know, I did not want to come on the Jewish angle the first time. Phoebe talked me into it. She was like, why don't you break all the codes of silence in the publishing industry? And I was like, I think that would destroy my career. False. False. So I came on the Jewish angle, and I thought, it's a Canadian who listens to it. Everybody is the answer. At least that episode. And suddenly my email inbox was full, including with the ADL. And the day that I was set up to have a call with the ADL, which ultimately resulted in me being a research partner with them on their upcoming report.
Which we will discuss in its own right as well.
Yeah,
go on.
Whatever I'm allowed to say. And the same day, Adam Bello of Wicked Sun had set up a call with me, and I thought he wanted to gossip. His email was basically like, I bet you know stories that you haven't shared in public. Want to talk? And I was like, sure. And that call ended up with them feeling me out. And at the beginning, they kept offering me books that I was not really sure I wanted to write. And so I kept doing the vague thing where I smiled a lot and said, maybe.
Wait, they offered you books, they suggested the books you could write.
Yeah, they were like, you should write a book about, being on the left and being a Jew in this environment and, clearly, feeling betrayed by the Democratic Party. And I was like, maybe. But I knew something was a little bit weird about the call from the beginning because it started with Adam saying, I've been to the University of Meg Keene. I've done 4 days of research on you. I've read everything there is to read. And I've been writing on the internet since 2008. So I was like, that's kind of a lot. Plus I have a hate forum that posts 1,000 posts about me a week and files them in a folder and moves on. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, that's kind of a weird amount of preparation to do for a call where we're going to gossip. And then by the end of the call, I started thinking is this going somewhere else? And then they offered me an imprint. And before the sentence had gotten out of their mouths, at this point, I had determined that I liked them, that I trusted them, it's interesting because they're conservative and I'm not, which is was the first thing out of their mouth, acknowledging that.
So let's just back up for a second. What is an imprint and who are they? Who are they? Always important to discuss on the Jewish angle.
Is the cabal. No, they is Adam Bello and David Bernstein, who are longtime publishers and who have literally been in business partnership with each other since I was in middle school. I've been in business partnership with like solely each other. And they've moved through various presses and various imprints. And now they run an imprint. They've also run various like conservative, like neoconservative presses. And now they run Wicked Sun, which is technically an imprint of Post Hill Press, which is a conservative press, which is funny because I am not conservative. But Wicked Sun Books started in 2020, I want to say, and it's not like right or left conservative. The idea is that it's publishing like Jewish voices who can't get published elsewhere, but it focuses on nonfiction. And they have published like a handful of fiction books over the years. They've never done very well. Like it hasn't been like a priority for them. They haven't put a lot of effort behind it. Not that the books were bad, just, if you don't put a ton of marketing effort behind something, it is what it is. And so technically Meg Keene Books is a line, apparently, because a line is what you have if you're technically underneath an imprint. But functionally it's an imprint. It's just a different way of saying it. So
is it part of a larger publishing house? Yeah.
So the Russian nesting dolls are Meg Keene Books. And then, which we can talk about that name, by the way, I was against it, but Meg Keene Books, which is underneath Wicked Sun Books, which is underneath Post Hill Press, which is distributed by Simon & Schuster.
Lots of nesting dolls.
Welcome to the publishing world in 2026.
Absolutely.
It's all like a conglomerate, but then it's like all the way down.
So what exactly are you looking for in fiction?
Well, when I was offered the line, they offered me 12 books a year. And I said no. I said that would be crazy because there is not at the moment funding. Like, I'm not getting paid yet. I will get paid on the back end. Hopefully we'll raise money and I'll get paid soon. But this is like me really putting the cart before the horse. I don't have a staff, etc. And I have run a major publishing company, just of a different type, a digital publishing company. And I was like, I cannot possibly publish 12 books and do a good job. So I counter offered with 4 books and they took my offer. Then now it's hovering between 4 and 6. And the idea is that I'll publish 4 to 6 books, in the next year. I'll put like basically my entire self, my entire online persona, my entire like network, everything behind marketing them. And so I feel like I have a mandate to really demonstrate like the breadth of Jewish talent that is not being picked up by mainstream publishers, which means I need to publish really across genre, right? So I need to pick up like Jewish romance. I need to pick up like a family saga. I need to pick up literary fiction. And I'm really determined to pick up a Jewish thriller, which everyone's very excited about. I was in Israel meeting with like the big deal agents there, and all of them were like, oh, Jewish literary or like a Jewish thriller. And I would be like, great, do you have one? And they were like, no, but I really want to read one. So TBD. I am convinced it exists somewhere.
So I was wondering about the process, because I have some questions about like the literature itself, but because of the unique nature of what you're doing here, and this is about kind of capturing voices not otherwise being heard at this moment, are you approaching it differently? Like, are you getting more unagented stuff than would a normal situation? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think in a more normal situation, unagented stuff just would not be accepted.
Right. Right.
And I feel like I have to make an exception because there are so many Jews that are struggling to get agents or keep agents, or actually have agents that are like willing to sort of do their job. I just read a full manuscript from someone who said, like, basically my agent said because of the Jewish content, nobody would want this book. And so they won't send it out. Right. So she has an agent, but I would argue the agent's not doing her job very well. So that does mean that I like have a slush pile. Also, I can't tell you what it is, but we've done our first 2 acquisitions. One of them is like a huge deal book by a huge deal author. So really what I'm learning is like, I mean, I opened my email inbox today and I had like pushcart award nominees. And if you don't know, that's like a big literary award, like a Pulitzer Prize, a past Pulitzer Prize winner, like a Booker Award winner, like a Hollywood executive producer with like huge credits to their name who just wanted to talk. So basically, if we were unsure back in April if talent is being excluded, and like to some extent, people are still fighting about that, I think my inbox proves that talent is definitely being excluded because I, as like a new editor at a tiny imprint, am being handed things that like should have gone to like a 6-way, 6-figure auction with the major houses, and no one will pick up.
So I wanted to ask about what sort of your, obviously, 4 books, not an infinite sample, but like, what are you considering to be Jewish writing? Because this is something that I discussed with Hal Nidbietsky on the podcast previously when we were talking about the Penn Report. We should also talk about the Penn Report a little bit. So there was this Penn America report on anti-Semitism in publishing and anti-Israeli discrimination in publishing. And there's something that I had wondered about reading it was just like, what happens? Like, there are writers who are kind of pushed out because they're Jewish, whether or not the content has anything to do with like particularly Jewish topics. Like there's this kind of, I guess, like so stuff that kind of could fall between the cracks. So are you going to only publish things that are like, in this Jewish novel, this Jewish person on their Birthright Israel trip does something very Jewishly, and No,
though I am looking for like a Birthright IDF like sex romp, if anyone has one. But no. So it's interesting because some of the preconceptions I had about like how I would look at books are already getting sort of blown out of the water as I start doing the job. I actually had to call back an interviewer after I spent time in my submissions inbox being like, what I told you I was going to do was not right. Strike it from the record. So I do feel this year with these 4 books, like I do have sort of pressure, or I'm putting pressure on myself to try to publish some like Jewish novels that are getting sidelined, in that I think I've been doing this project of like reading the Jewish canon since April, since I had this like initial offer, including a lot of stuff I haven't read, AKA men. And someone accused me of like only reading male authors, and I was like, no, I only read female authors.
But it's good I have a Philip Roth question for you coming up. But continue.
So as I try to catch up on the male canon. But I have noticed that I think in the 2010s, there was really a shift from these like very, very Jewish novels to the only books we were getting most of the books we were getting being more like Jewish representation. Like it's like a woman named Rachel lights a Hanukkah menorah once, right? And then otherwise it's just a romance or whatever, which isn't uniform, but I think that we saw more of that. And so I really would like to sort of start this with like heralding a return to like the more Jewish novel, especially because those are not being published. But long term, I don't think that is like my mandate. And interestingly, I haven't talked about this in public, but I like to break news on the Jewish angle.
That's what we're here for.
I also am like allowed is like the wrong word, but like I also am being encouraged to pick up nonfiction, though it technically like wouldn't live under Meg Keene Books because that's supposed to be like a primarily fiction brand, but I would be the acquiring editor on it. So some people have started to come to me with nonfiction books, actually one by someone who's like very prominent and is not Jewish, but is an ally and wants to write about Jewish subjects. So that alone is sort of like outside the metric, or like outside what looks like the metric. And I'm really interested in any Jewish author that is being pushed out that has quality work. So at the end of the day, like I have realized that when I open a manuscript and it's really good, that's really my like primary metric. I'm like, oh, this is great. How can I get my hands on it?
Well, it's a good one to have. But yeah, something that had not occurred to me when we talked, but only did after, and that I wrote about then for the CJN for our website, was that I'm one of these Jewish authors. And this hadn't really, I knew I was Jewish and I knew I was an author, but like, it was only when I got some kind of like blue sky pylon of people who were mad. It wasn't really me getting, it was the Walrus published an excerpt of my book, The Last Straight Woman, which is not about Jewish topics particularly. And all these people were like, that Zionist, that, whatever. And it was like genocide or whatever. And I was like, this is a book about straight women in Britcoms and like they are, there's not, whatever. But it did seem, it got me thinking sort of like, so I mentioned this before when I was talking with Hal on that previous episode, but also I was just thinking about like the state of American Jewish and North American Jewish, Canadian Jewish literature. And really, for me, I keep coming back to that Philip Roth thing of like, I'm just an American writer who happens to be Jewish. That was his line,
Sure, Philip Roth.
So I want to talk about that a bit, though, because I think, and I've also been just for various reasons, like, revisiting Seinfeld and so forth, I watch a lot of Netflix, whatever. I've been researching this television program, Seinfeld.
Right.
But what I find, though, is like that it was discussed as this sort of golden age, but there was a lot of like evasiveness about the Jewishness, a lot of kind of not being open about it, where it's there, but that not being said for fear of alienating people. And it wasn't about the sort of anti-Semitism of 2026. It wasn't that kind of thing. But there was just this uneasiness, you know what I mean? Sure. And I wonder whether this whole category that I'm talking about, like the Jewish author, especially for fiction, like the Jewish authored book that's not such a Jewish book, might itself just become less of a thing as that specific fusion kind of like, maybe it just doesn't make sense anymore, this category. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
I mean, I think Jews should be able to write about whatever they want to write about. And ideally we like collectively should be providing a platform. Let's put a pin in Philip Roth for a second, but I have thought a lot recently about this idea of like the golden age of American Jewry and like American Jewish literature, and wondering, as we're seeing this groundswell really suddenly of Jewish presses start, because I'm not the only one. There's another one that's been announced, and there's a third that will be announced in September. If we're going to see something that is actually more akin to a golden age, where, because people have asked me, is this ghettoization? And like, one, we should continue fighting to be included in mainstream press or like mainstream, like the big five, right? But it's not currently happening, so we can't just wait around, right?
And this is in the big five, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's distributed by Simon Schuster.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think Jews have a long history of demonstrating that when we do this, it's not ghettoization, right? That Jews essentially created Hollywood. And I don't think anyone is going to, because they were not welcome in other industries. And I don't think anyone's going to argue that Hollywood was like a ghettoization of the Jews, right? Like Mount Sinai Hospital is not like a ghettoization of the Jews, right? Like we build institutions and then they become massive institutions. Simon & Schuster was founded and built by Jews, and now they're publishing like authors that say Jews are like parasites and rats. So basically we built all these institutions, and then when things felt safe, we backed away and they became general institutions. And then when things were not safe anymore, we didn't have, those institutions had become general. And so I think we're being called to like build these new institutions. But I hope that those institutions will go on to become, Mount Sinai or Simon & Schuster or Hollywood or whatever, right? It's just sort of like, where do you start? So I sat down and actually wrote, Phoebe may be one of the only people on earth that would be interested in reading the document in full, but I wrote like 3 pages of like what I want to acquire and like all of these different comps. And now I have to boil it down to something that like regular people would want to read. But one of the things that I came across as a theme, well, one of the things I came across early, interestingly, was like memory and like family immigration and like intergenerational trauma and the way memory transmutes and whatever. But one of the things I realized is that I don't want to be a publisher that like avoids things that are like Ashana to the Goyim, right? I don't want to publish ideological fiction. I don't want to publish fiction that like exists to make Jews look good or exists to like argue it like a certain like point, because I just don't think those are bad books. Like Yesteryear is my recent example of like ideological fiction that like in theory I agree with, and I just thought the book was like really terrible and I don't want to publish that.
Yeah. Kat brought me her copy when she was in town. Kat was filled in. I have yet to open it, but I wanted to talk just briefly about the ADL work. So you're also doing research on anti-Semitism in publishing, and I wanted to ask.
Research on anti-Semitism in publishing with the ADL, but yeah.
So, what are you finding, and like with what sort of methodology?
Yeah, so I can't say very much about the ADL other than the ADL has a lot of lawyers.
Okay.
So I can say that I'm a research
you're doing
partner.
stuff.
That I was a research partner with the ADL, and that report is upcoming.
Okay.
I can tell you, however, about research that I did.
Sure,
personally.
That works.
And so I did 2 branches of research, and like I'm not actually being disingenuous. Some of this got incorporated into ADL stuff. Some of it didn't. Some of it I wrote about in essays. But speaking about sort of what I did under my own steam, I tried to do data analysis, looking at publishers' marketplace data. I think it showed really extreme results. It's also like I was looking at the best available public data, which had a lot of limitations, right? So I showed like a 76% decline between 2023 and 2024, 73% decline, I think, in Jewish books that were like spoken about as books with Jewish content by Jewish authors. And then between 2023, like pre-October 7th, and this year, it was 83% decline. So really drastic numbers. And then the other thing I did, because I think you have to combine them, is I talked to a lot of authors. The ADL wanted me to like reach out and collect information for people for them to talk to. But as I did that, I had personal conversations with a lot of people. And I think, one, it's incredibly widespread. I was reassuring people very often that like everyone felt isolated because nobody felt like they could speak out, right? So authors would come to me and be like, I feel like I'm the only person that's experienced this. And I would like, a lot of it was on Instagram DMs. And I would be like, I literally have 10 messages like before and after you with everyone saying the same thing. So I think that part of what needed to happen was like that silence needed to break. And because it's crazy making when you think you're the only person experiencing something. And when you realize like, no, it's happening all around you. It's very different psychologically. But what I think is like most notable is truly because there are still people that are trying to argue that this isn't real and there isn't discrimination in publishing. I have really tried to move forward into like, let's do something about it. Cause it feels very Jewish to like debate the nuance of like, is or is not this thing even real, like forever. And like, we can maybe get up from like the Talmud discussion and like try to do something. But the worst cases and the worst stuff I heard in terms of what's like happening institutionally within the Big Five was people that could not even go on the record anonymously because they, were involved in legal disputes or, felt like their entire career would be ruined. So sort of like what you're seeing is like what you see in an ADL report or what you see in a PEN America report is actually not, it's really bad, right? But it's not the worst. The worst stuff is like still under the surface. And I assume in like 10 years, it'll become public. So it's
Right.
not the case that these reports are highlighting a couple of like the worst incidents. They're really just like, that's like the mainline, like mid-level stuff, which is terrible.
So something I've been wondering about, and I don't know who would be the one to cover this, but I haven't read it yet, but something I think in Tablet about French Jews kind of taking the lead on Jewish pride, whereas it used to be more sort of American Jews doing so, and that there's been kind of a reversal in this. And I was thinking about this when, by happenstance, I was in France in some bookstores, and I noticed there are Jewish books there. And I got one. I got some book from 2026, like about Schmott, like the Schmotta industry. It's a sociology book that seems great. And I do wonder, like, I think there would be something, maybe this is more something for an academic to do, like comparative literature or something, but like, because there are all these articles about like which place is so terrible now for Jews. And I do wonder whether like the same cultural thing is happening across the board in the same way in different countries, that have a lot of Jews in them.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if it, and I just came back from Israel where obviously
there are some Jewish books there, presumably.
Jewish books. There's a great English language bookstore now in Tel Aviv, which is really cool. Because there was like not, there's a huge Anglo population, but there wasn't access to English language books as widely. But I do wonder if it doesn't correlate in some cases. Like the golden age of American Jewry was really when it was easy, or like the easiest to be Jewish in America, right?
Oh, I kind of wanted to ask you about crossover with like straight women and Jews in literature as sort of like passe 90s coded. Okay, so I will ask you that then. Okay, I was going to say I don't know if we have time to, but yeah, okay, I'll do that.
We'll make time.
We'll make time. Let's do that. Let's have that be where we wrap up. Because I was thinking that there's some sort of like there's something very, maybe this comes from watching some Sex and the City on the flight back, the original show, not the reboots this time. But like
you were researching.
I was doing some research. That like there are these categories of people who will be like in Vogue, not as in Vogue magazine, but like in fashion, and then won't be, and who will be considered kind of like edgy and then won't be. And that like there is some common ground, I think, between straight women, the group of people I most recently wrote about, and Jews, a group of people we talk about sometimes on the Jewish angle.
Two groups that we
consider this a prompt. I don't really have a conclusion here.
Yeah. I mean, it has been really interesting, like looking at also like the Jewish canon and how historically male it is. But then you have these like great breakthrough moments like Fear of Flying, right? Which talk about like a book that is like a game changer for both straight women and Jewish women, right?
Yes.
But then it also fell out of fashion. And I went and reread or finished reading it, I guess. I mean, one, it's a really well-written book, right? Like we tend to give like Philip Roth all the credit, and then female writers were like, oh, they just like wrote about their own life and sex. And you're like, what do you think? Like, what do you think Saul Bellow is doing? So it's well written. And I also do feel like we've made some headway. There's a lot about her, like having an affair with this man with erectile dysfunction, who's also terrible. And you're like, this is great that you're like exploring yourself as like a straight woman and free love, but like maybe you could find someone who could like consummate, like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, and I think Girls is another example where, that show was pilloried. There's debate, but, I would say that she is a voice of a generation, if not the voice of her generation. I mean, Lena Dunham is an incredibly talented writer. She was an incredibly talented writer, really young. That show came out shortly after I had left New York, and I had lived that sort of exact, in that exact world. And so we watched it and loved it, and it was like so close to home. But that show was pilloried, and they were sort of like in and out of fashion and like loved and hated. And I think a lot of that had to do with this this whatever of being like, I remember like it would be like, well, they're straight and they're white, and white, it was really code for Jewish in this moment where being Jewish was really falling out of fashion, and being a straight woman was really becoming, I don't want to say like falling out of fashion, but a little bit, right? Like it was like not the voices we wanted to uplift as a society.
It was like that we've heard enough from this group of people. Now right. It's somebody else's time, kind of would be the way it would be.
Enough from like young Jewish women, like who are like, I don't really think that we have.
I guess my stance on this then and now is always like more voices of all sorts rather than we've heard enough from's. You know, like yes, I get there. Any particular entity's resources are finite and all, but like the idea that you should look at the overall landscape and say how can this person be getting published when it's like more people, more to like things,
bring it all
books.
Back. Like when I look at my inbox, to me, I really, really, truly am the most interested in like what is good and what is interesting, and not even like necessarily like my personal taste. Like I read a book that was like an age gap, like romance story. And like, that is one of my obsessions, is like stories of young women in their 20s having affairs with older men, like totally obsessed with that. But also, so like, yes, I'm interested in that because like, I want to read those books. But I also like have a submission that I'm going to read this afternoon that I would describe as like very like Jewish dad lit, in that like it's a book that like Jewish middle-aged men are going to want to read. And like as an editor, I don't really care as long as it's good, right? Like, I mean, I want to publish a diverse array and blah, blah, blah. But like, I feel like the approach of like, do we have enough of X voices is a little limiting in that like, what is really, really good? Because when you look at like a stack, like the real truth is in the creative world, when you look at a stack of like scripts or manuscripts or whatever, most of them are not that great. And then every so often you come across one where you're like, this is a voice of a generation, not that our generation. And like, we should be pulling those from the stack, and that really shouldn't have to do with identity politics. Mm-hmm. Which makes me sound like I'm an 80-year-old conservative, but I am not. So This is a video podcast.
Meg Keene, thank you so much for coming back on the Jewish angle. I hope this is as fruitful for you as your previous. Welcome back anytime, obviously.
Thank you for having me. Always a delight. I await my life-changing gift in the mail. So come on the Jewish angle, guys. Phoebe will change your life.
But, don't manage expectations or anything. Thanks so much, Meg.
Thank you. Bye.
The Ashkenaz Festival returns to locations across Toronto from August 30th to September 6th. Experience the best of the global Jewish music scene, including klezmer, Yiddish, Sephardic, Ladino, Persian, and so much more. Most programs free, from downtown to North York. Details at ashkenaz.ca.